Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to see what is check exception versus uncheck exception. So then we will understand what is throwable, error, exception, what are the type of exception we will get. So there we will understand runtime exception, which are the types of runtime exception, then check the exception that we are going to see. And throwable class we are going to see, which is inheriting exception is inheriting throwable or error is inheriting throwable. So this will we understand in the this video tutorial, so stay with me. First we will understand what is check the exception. So first, if we see check the exception are exception that are checked at compile time, and the Java compiler enforce that method either handle this exception using try catch block or declare them using the throws keyword. So check the exception are the exception that must be handled at the compile time. Let's see one example here. So if we see this system.out.println, so 5 divided by 0. So here is no exception. But if we see this file input stream, so it will give us an exception at the compile time. So Java compiler is telling us that handle this exception at the compile time only. So we can add exception to the method signature, or we can throw this, means we can throw this exception, or we can surround this with the try catch block. So if we go here, we can add it with surround with try catch block. So like this, we can handle check the exception. Then what is runtime exception? Runtime exception is a unchecked exception. So if we see unchecked exception are exception that are not checked at compile time. So unchecked exception are exception that are not checked at compile time, but rather at runtime. So these exception are checked at runtime. So let's see one example here. So here, if we see this system dot out dot println is not giving us as error at compile time. But if we run this program, it will throw one runtime exception. That is, it is a runtime exception. Let it run first. So here if we see, we are getting this arithmetic exception divided by 0. And this is the unchecked exception we occur here. Then if we see, they are subclasses of runtime exception and usually indicate programming errors such as logical error, improper use of an API. The compiler does not force you to handle or declare this exception. Means compiler here not suggesting that you should handle or not, because it is thrown at the runtime. So these are the checked and unchecked exception. Here we see hierarchy. Throwable is at the top of the exception hierarchy in Java, is the throwable class. All error and exception are subclass of this throwable. We go inside, this throwable is the parent class, and error is extending this throwable, and exception is also extending throwable. So then next, if we see error, the error class represents serious issues that a typically application should not try to catch. Error are generally used by the JVM to indicate problems that are external to the application. Means error when occur, the problem is external, such as out of memory error or stack overflow error. So means our memory is full, at that time we will get out of memory error or stack overflow error we will get. So here if we see, error is representing here out of memory error, and exception is error representing stack overflow error and IO exceptions. Then check the exception and direct subclasses of exceptions. So here if we see, that are not subclasses of runtime exception. Example includes IO exception, SQL exception. So check what are the checked exception, IO exception or SQL exception. That is input output we are getting. Then unchecked exception is a subclasses of runtime exception. Example includes null pointer exception, array index out of bound exception. This we just have seen. Then what is the difference in this? We are going to see checked exception. So yes, it is checked by compiler. Yeah, we must be handle. So unchecked exception not required to handle, declared or handle. Then base class direct subclasses. Checked exception are the direct subclasses of the exception. Here we see exception IO, or here checked exception is subclasses of exception, and this IO exception, SQL exception, file not found exception is a type of the exception, checked exception. Then here if we see unchecked exception are direct subclasses of runtime exception. Here we have null pointer exception, illegal argument exception, arithmetic exception. So these are the exception that is unchecked in the Java program. And usage here if we see used for condition that the program should anticipate, and unchecked exception used for programming errors and runtime issues. Then typically handling must be caught or declared in the method signatures. So we have seen this must be caught or declared in the method signatures. So here if we go, we can declare this or we can throw this. Then open handle through debugging or global exception handler. So runtime exception handler by global exception handler. So I have created separate video on this global exception handler. If you guys have not watched, please watch this on our channel. Then next, if we see checked exception, example, IO exception, SQL exception, class not found exception. These are the exception of the checked. And unchecked is a null pointer exception, array index out of bound exception, illegal argument exception, arithmetic exception. These are the example of unchecked exception. Then practical implication here, if we see checked exception require explicit handling, which can make code more robust, but also more cumbersome. And it encourage developer to handle exceptional condition in a controlled manner. But whereas unchecked exception can simplify code, but might lead to unexpected runtime issues if not properly handled. So if we have not handled properly, it will give us a issues in the runtime. It often indicate bugs or misuses in the program that should be fixed rather than the code. So these are the all about checked and unchecked exception, guys. I hope you have gained some knowledge from these videos. If you like the content of the videos, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys.